waiting for Lynette to join us. Hello there.
Hi there.
How nice it is to see you.
Oh, how good to see you, Helen. This is lovely.
It is nice, isn't it, for us to connect like this? So I was just saying to everyone what fun it's been to come online and talk to everyone in our Mindful Me community, and those of you who are joining us for the first time, to introduce our new workshop, the one that we'll be running for 3 months, that requires a great deal of commitment to sign up to, that Lynette and Kirsty and I will be teaching together. And tonight, I want to introduce Lynette as part of our team, and for us, Lynette, to talk to each other about what's coming up for us. Tonight in particular, we've said we're going to have a discussion about the beginning of this workshop, and particularly to deepen the conversation that we began last week and to talk about resilience. So I'd love to ask you if you could talk to us about your understanding of what resilience is, and in particular about how we worked out to craft our own ways of becoming resilient as little ones. Why we had to use resilience as a coping technique, and in fact why we have to understand what resilience is altogether. So how's about that?
It's a great place to start. Resilience. Yeah, resilience is a really cool thing to talk about because we've heard so much about it during this time, right? And we've heard about the 7 skills of resilience. You might have read about the 5 ways to be resilient. And there's 4 different actual true categories of resiliency. There's physical resiliency, psychological, there's the community, there's emotional. But resiliency at its very core, at its purest essence, is our ability to bounce back from any tragedy, from any heartbreak, from struggle, from stress, our ability to manage it in ourselves, in our families, in our communities. So that's what resilience is. At its simplest, just our ability to be with whatever is here.
So our ability to learn how to be when we're young, even with whatever happens to us.
Yeah. Well, resiliency, when we're young, when we're little, we usually learn our resiliency from the pods of humans we're in, which is our family, right? Generally, our kind of resiliency set point comes from the way that maybe our family or our communities or our culture handled stress or pain or heartbreak.
Or didn't handle stress.
Yeah, that's usually when we notice it the most, right? When we take on this, I don't want to call it a lack of resiliency, because we're all resilient, or we wouldn't be sitting here. We all have gorgeous, marvelous ways of tending to ourselves and tending to those around us. But usually when we really start noticing it is when things are going wrong, when we're not resilient, when we start kind of collapsing or overreacting, or things become too painful to manage or too overwhelming. Often overwhelm is a very big signal that our resiliency maybe isn't as robust as it could be.
So it's interesting using the word overwhelm, isn't it? Because I notice that that's a word that many people use to describe their state of current being at the moment. Feeling overwhelmed, but forever, apart from these interesting times we live in now. I think people use the word "I'm overwhelmed" when they're talking about any stress levels, when things are too much, where they feel they don't have enough room to hold it all inside. And I imagine that now you've introduced the notion of that being our ability to bounce back, that many people are discovering. They didn't really learn the techniques they needed, or they weren't supported in their families.
Yeah. Well, when things are going well, we tend to think that we're very resilient. And it's kind of when things get dicey is when we realize we haven't, from the mindfulness perspective, we haven't breathed enough space or sat deep in ourselves enough to create enough space to hold all that extra, we'll call it pressure, because we're using overwhelm. But when I think about when I get overwhelmed, it's usually because I'm not tending to my internal. I'm not being mindful. So there's no space. There's no space for the stress, the heartbreak, the hurt, the kids are now online in school. You know, I'm working from home, and so is my husband, and it's very loud. The overwhelm is actually the no space for it. So it's overfilling. It's too much for the space that we have, and that's when we
So
notice.
do you imagine that when children are little and that happens to them and they don't get the comfort that they need, that they turn outside of themselves for their coping techniques?
Oh, of course, of course. Yeah. And it also, you know, and we turn outside when we're little because we don't have we don't have a big skill set when we're little. So we do turn outside to distract ourselves. But also, often we are comforted with food, or our parents buy us something, or this whole idea of quality over quantity of time, right? That, oh, I've given my children quality time. But if it wasn't enough, if it didn't nourish them or comfort them or fill them, it can feel like they didn't get met. So then they turn to, or our parents often will give us a snack. So then we find ourselves turning to food, or there was always maybe something new, or there wasn't enough. So then we end up spending money and buying things and distracting that way. So yeah, the things that we did when we were children are really the things that we do now, just a bit more sophisticated.
As adults, yeah. So when we're going to be teaching this in the workshop, we're going to teach people, first of all, how to build resiliency in themselves, aren't we?
Yeah.
And how to work out the patterns that they've created and how to empower ourselves in new ways.
Yes.
So
Yeah,
can you talk to us about that a bit, please?
Yeah. One of my favorite teachers, Helen Williams, once told me, once you see it, you can change your mind. The moment you notice something, you can change your mind. But if you don't notice it, then it's underground. It's a pattern that you don't even know you have.
Mm.
So in the workshop, what we're really going to do is a deep dive into our own systems, our own patterns, our own attachments, and look at it not from a standpoint of, well, I need to change this, something's wrong with me, but oh, so often people who experience this behave in particular ways. Okay, so let's see if that fits me and what I can do about it. And we're going to really do a deep dive into the skills and the nourishing ways that we can build our resilience now without going outside of ourselves, without abandoning ourselves again or not meeting our needs again, you know? Because that's kind of what we do. We abandon ourselves because it hurts. So we try and scuttle away and stay busy or get mad or blame someone else. All things that are perfectly marvelous. They served us well, but they're not really serving us now.
Yeah, you think of last night, we were doing this lovely mindful living workshop together, and how many of the participants said we would like further to discuss self-abandonment, how we abandon ourselves and don't actually realize that we've done it or that we're doing it.
Yeah.
Because the reason, of course, for running this whole series called How Can I Truly Love Myself is to relearn, isn't it? Excuse me, or remember, or learn for the first time in community and with each other how to really truly meet ourselves again. And to do that, we have to build a pool of resilience, don't we, to begin with? Can you talk to us a bit about how we're going to go about that?
Oh, lots of practice and lots of being in community, lots of experiential work. Not everything is going to work for everyone. There's no tickety-boo way. But together, we will, like I said, practice a lot of self-compassion, practice some embodiment, returning to our body. As one of our more just gorgeous Mindful Me members said a couple weeks ago, we're going to remember what we forgot.
Isn't that fabulous? I loved it when she said that.
It's so gorgeous. And that's what we're going to do through a lot of learning. Some of it will be just learning us, just meeting ourselves, and then sitting with, not only sitting with that, but sitting in community, sitting in relationship with each other. So we don't feel so alone. We don't feel like I'm the only one who does this. Because when we when we practice the things that we know, which maybe are the healthiest or best for us, often shame arrives, right?
Mm.
And we've seen that a lot throughout this lockdown. Some of us have turned to food, some people have turned to over exercising, anything at the ends of the spectrum that are over. Too much, too little, right? Like Goldilocks. We need to find that middle space. And that's what we're going to practice together. Finding
So
that middle.
yes, we talked about doing this in community. I think of the numbers of people who've said they have such a yearning to be in community again with each other, and yet we can't do this in person.
Yeah.
So yeah, my experience has been of creating community like this using Zoom calls on a regular basis. And we did, didn't we, together last night with a group of us. It's astonishing, isn't it, how it works?
It's absolutely astonishing how we can meet each other on Zoom in community and feel so held and so safe. And actually, it's even, I love that we can meet with people that we wouldn't be able to. Some of our awesome community members have now left Dubai, and yet they're coming back and taking workshops with us. And we never could have done that before and had their gorgeous experience and their presence. It's been astonishing. I've so enjoyed it. So enjoyed it on Zoom.
Yes, and me too. And that notion that hearing someone, as someone said it again last night to us, hearing someone say, gosh, I'm not the only one, or it's not just me that's having this experience. We're constantly reinforcing, aren't we, with each other, that we all feel the same and that we need community.
We do. And that's a huge piece of resilience. You know, people, we think of, you know, I'm from the country and we use the word grit. Oh, that person has grit. But I've always thought, I liked the word and I liked the fact that I have a lot of grit, but there's not a lot of compassion in grit. It's gutting through, it's making it happen, it's doing what you have to do. And in community, we can meet ourselves and not feel alone. And it's also, to be resilient, one of the huge parts of it is knowing how to be in relationship with yourself and with others. And that's the best part. We're not alone, that we're in this together.
And that question that I said last week, if I ever had the time to write a book, this is what my book is going to be about. You know, you and I talk about this a lot. How can I truly love myself? Is it possible? And people say to me all the time, please, Helen, can you help me meet myself? I say, well, first of all, come and be part of our community because we're all doing this together. But let's begin with the question, why have I not? Why am I learning it now as an adult? And why are people in their 30s and 40s and 50s and 60s saying, how come I don't have a relationship with me? How come I don't even know how to do it? So we're going to address that.
We are.
And a lot of that comes from, sorry?
Oh, sorry, go ahead, love.
So a lot of that comes from the wonderful piece of training that you've done and that you teach us so eloquently about the styles that we learned to be attached to our caregivers when we were small. Do you want to tell us a bit more about that?
I could talk for hours, but I'll just
I
briefly.
know. I love it when you do.
Me too. So I've trained with Diane Poole-Heller in dynamic attachment repair, which is all about healing your attachment wounds and finding your attachment resiliency. And I've also trained in transforming the experience-based brain, which is really finding in your body, having an embodied sense of security and attachment. So all of my work, I'm a yoga teacher, I'm a massage therapist, I'm end-of-life doula, but all of it comes back to this, that when we really meet ourselves at our attachment, holding hands with mindfulness, because we can't meet ourselves without stillness and space. And that's what mindfulness brings to us.
Mm.
Then we truly can tend to ourselves in ways that taking one more course, getting one more certificate, doing one more thing, losing 50 pounds, gaining 50 pounds, getting plastic surgery, all those are gorgeous. But if you don't tend to what's under that at the heart level and make space through mindfulness, it's going to be a hard road to hoe back to yourself. But if we can truly, truly make the space through mindfulness and then meet ourselves at our attachment, at our very heart, it's impossible not to fall back in love with ourselves, because we always were in love with ourselves. Things just got in the way, right? So we just remember what we forgot, which is we love ourselves. It's possible.
Yeah, and the beauty of that, what mindfulness has brought to me over the years, the notion of being able to take a step back and watch myself, to take that wonderful breath and think, between any event that takes place, no matter whether it's big or small, tragic, funny, and my reaction to it at the time, there is a space in which I might choose what happens next. Every time I teach that to someone, I watch them comprehend it. You know, we don't have to just put up with what happens to us. We can actually make the space in which we can choose. How will I respond to this? How can I bring my best self to it? So the other word for mindfulness, of course, is awareness. Well, we're learning to practice awareness, and we're bringing that awareness to our attachment systems now, aren't we? The understanding that each of us has a system. Can you tell us a bit more about attachment systems? Maybe even just to explain briefly what they are. That would be useful.
Yeah. So very, very briefly, and we've all, I'm sure most of us have taken a BuzzFeed, what's your attachment test? We've seen it in magazines. You see it on, HuffPost does lots of things around attachment. Our attachments really are the adaptations that we made to survive our relationships in childhood. And they were healthy, amazing adaptations that kept us alive. The problem with adaptations made when you are 18 months to 3 years old to 5 years old, we're not super sophisticated beings at that age. And so until we become aware of the attachment adaptations that we've made, we think that that's just how we are. That's what we do. That's the patterning we were talking about.
This is who I am.
It's who I am.
I love how you call it my attachment adaptation.
Yeah, it's just an
and like
phrase. It is. It's grand. And they were gorgeous. We shouldn't shame ourselves for them. They got us here. How gorgeous that is. But they're not serving us now. If they're negatively impacting our relationships with others, with ourselves, with our community, our children. So really just turning and giving them a cuddle. Once, like you said, once you see it, once we're aware of it and we notice it, we can make different decisions.
It's interesting. I said to someone I was talking to today, someone I just met for the first time, I think about understanding our attachment systems a bit like how much I understand my car. I said to him, I like my car, but I wouldn't have a clue what goes on under the bonnet. Though, interestingly enough, the last time I took it in for a service, the man said to me afterwards, well, everything is done. You've got some new brake pads, all the water's been topped up, fresh oil, etc. And as I drove away, I said to my car, inside my car, oh, I'm so glad that you're well. I can really trust you now. I feel safe driving you. I can trust you. And yet I had the realization that whilst I'm doing that, I really don't have a clue about what goes on under the bonnet. And I said to the man today, what fascinates me is we do exactly that in adult relationships. We cotton on to somebody. We say, you look wonderful, well, I haven't got a clue what's under your bonnet, but actually I feel good being with you. And I feel as though we're going to do well together. And 20 years later, who understands anything about attachment wounding? Nobody. I'm really fascinated by the numbers of couples I work with who've never even heard the phrase, let alone understand what attachment, adaptions. They were with me when I was 18 months old. And I've been building on those all my life. What's that?
Yeah.
I think about it like a warrant of fitness.
Yeah. Yeah. And once you are really aware and you see, you don't have to know synapses, you don't have to know the psychobiological anything. It's all right out here in our behaviors and in our thought processes.
Yeah.
And once we notice them and start seeing them, we can start, oh, that's why I do that. Whereas if you don't know about it, you behave certain ways in a relationship, you have the same fight all the time, you attract the same kind of partner, and then you shame yourself and you think, well, if only I wasn't so needy, I'll just stop being needy and I'll attract better humans. But really, it's not about you being needy. It's just about your attachment system is wired a very particular way. Just like your resiliency, we can tend to it. Just like your car, we can make it run a little bit better with no shame, with just compassion. Yeah. And once you do that, once we know ourselves, then we know, I'm thinking of mostly single people, right? Once you know what you need, you truly need to feel safe in relation with yourself, then you may attract lots of peculiar people, but you will be so aware of your own groundedness, you will have no interest in them because they will not be able to meet the needs that you know that you have. Not that it's up to another human to meet your needs, but if they're not even willing to acknowledge you have them, then that's not the human for you. Right?
No, and what's interesting is us not even understanding that we have these needs ourselves. I think that this is the beauty of being able to learn and to teach this stuff to people who care to know. These are ways of learning how to reattach to ourselves nowadays in a whole new way that opens and flourishes us so that we blossom and become truly who we actually are, not who we're meant to be, who we actually already are. I think of lovely conversations I've had with you over recent times about, so I'm back to cars again, about all the different parts inside of us, and doing what parts does my car need to make it run well, or what parts of my car do I need to pay attention to? And I think about doing parts work, which I hope that we're going to actually be covering during our wonderful new workshop. The parts of us that are covered up. You know, last week I used the little Russian doll to talk about the different parts of us that were covered up. So what would you like to say about parts? Because I know you and I talk about this quite a lot, the different parts of us.
We do. Well, I think everyone recognizes at some level that we are made up of different parts. We even use it in our language, right? Oh, a part of me really wants to go out this weekend, but part of me just wants to stay home and sleep. Or, a part of me is really attracted to that human being, but a part of me, I don't know, they don't feel right. We really are made of parts. And in parts work, in internal family systems, just very briefly, generally, the part of us that is our very core, that is just, the very part of us is ourself, the essence of ourself. We're grounded in that peace that is never changing and always there. The parts that were wounded when we were too little to know we were being wounded, they were too little to take. They didn't have any resilience. They're little. We were too little to have resilience. We're not supposed to have resilience at that time, right? So other parts of us come in to protect that very fragile, teeny, wounded piece. One of those parts is our manager part, which is our tickety-boo part. This is the part that always wants to take another class, lose 5 pounds, do your taxes. This is a great part. We love the manager part of us. Again, none of these are shameful. Every single one of our parts are gorgeous and are doing hard work to keep us alive and going and safe. So that's the manager part. And then we have the firefighter part. Now the firefighter part, his only job is to protect that wounded little piece in our heart. Or the firefighter can, these are actually genderless. The firefighter part is that part of us that overeats, overexercises, overcommits, sleeps for 18 hours just to get up to go to work on Sunday morning. Everything, the firefighter is just hot and fast. It's just doing everything it can to put out the fire around that little wounded piece. When that little wounded piece gets a little flare up of, oh, this hurts, the firefighter will come in and put it out, usually with a lot of behaviors that we shame ourselves for. Or the manager comes in with one more checklist of things to do, right? We all have these parts, they all fire up, but they are honestly doing everything they can to adore us with a limited skill set. Again, they took on all their skills when they were too young and too little to know any better. So we're gonna do a little parts work. We're gonna meet some parts, which parts, all of our parts are actually holding hands with our attachment system. Everything comes back to the attachment system. So once we can meet these parts of us with enough capacity, enough awareness, and enough space in our heart, we'll fall in love with them all. And we can start kind of taking these jobs away from them, not changing them, not shaming them, not executing them or getting them out of our life, but being like, oh, I see what you were trying to do there. But I really don't need to pound down an entire box of biscuits every time my boss yells at me. We have other skills now. Let's try those. And we're going to learn those skills and practice those skills in our workshop.
Yeah. Well, there's lots to learn, isn't there?
There is.
I love the fact that once we become aware of all these different parts, being able to say to people, it is possible to fall in love with yourself.
Oh,
it is possible. Yeah. And that we know people who can and have and do. Yeah. So many people think someone else needs to do this for us. Yeah. But the notion that we can, and that for most people it's just fear that gets in the way. Mm-hmm. I was thinking the other day about how I was reading this quote, that the greatest barrier to courage is actually not fear. The greatest barrier to courage to go and do this work together is actually not fear. It's the armor that we put in place that protects all these parts, because we think that's what we have to do in order to be safe. And so the funny thing is, in order for it to fall in love, we have to learn how to un-armor. Isn't that the funniest thing? To make our way through all of that we've put in place to protect us, to learn to have the courage.
All those things that get between. Yeah.
Yeah. To understand what our armor is, and to notice that all of us have it. It's just protection, isn't it? And the very thing that we do that protects us to keep us safe actually makes a prison of us, locks us in and keeps us away from ourselves.
It is.
Yeah.
And even the armor is, it's keeping us away from ourselves, and it's not allowing in love. It's not allowing in compassion, but even it needs a cuddle, right? Even it needs, oh, look at you trying so hard to keep me safe, and what you've done is kept me separate. And that's what community does, is we get to look at each other and go, oh, you too? Me too. I thought I was the only one.
Yeah.
And then little by little, the armor will soften and drop itself, because it's like, oh, yeah. I would rather have the relationship with these gorgeous souls than to stand behind this armor alone. Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. So tell me some of the names that people might name their armor, just so they understand.
Oh, well, how funny. I can't think of anything.
Is it protection systems? I was thinking.
Oh,
No, yeah, all our protection systems.
yeah, okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, one thing we do is we'll often overwork, keep
Yeah.
ourselves extraordinarily busy. And if
That's
we
a Dubai trait.
as a huge Dubai trait, money, if we're talking Dubai traits, more money. I just need more money. Another thing we do is never stop moving, either physically, emotionally, or in our head. We're always thinking, thinking, thinking. There's never rest. That's it. Not allowing ourselves to rest. Not feeding ourselves well, either overeating or restricting our food. Anything really that we do to an enormous extreme. In relationships, often it can look like it's always someone else's fault. I'm not wrong. That's a huge armor because it hurts too much, right? What are some armors?
That's good, because I'm hoping that people who are listening are understanding these aspects of themselves, and understanding too that instead of saying get rid of it, freeze it out, walk away from it. We're actually going to teach how you learn to fall in love with yourself is learning to allow with love all of these different parts, all of these protections. This is actually the basis of what resiliency is, really, isn't it?
Yes.
With love. How I learn to fall in love with myself is loving myself, not despising, turning away from, not continuing to do what we've always done.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm so looking forward to it, Lynette, aren't you?
Me too.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? How many times you and Kirsty and I have said to each other the last few weeks when we've been talking about this, oh, this is a workshop I want to come to.
I know. No, I want to sign up. It's fabulous.
Yeah, so can I just say, and talk about some of the dates and times and things. One of the loveliest things about the way Mindful Me does things is when we ourselves fall in love with something and get a great response to it, then we know that this is something we're going to continue to teach. So mindfulness is the workshop that we teach every single month, because we know that the basis for a lot of what we do is learning mindfulness. And I would suggest that we can continue to support people knowing our mindfulness takes place every Tuesday night, and that you can take part starting at the beginning of October. Mindfulness will always be on Tuesday nights, and again in November. And then again, whatever 2021 brings us, it's going to be mindfulness practice still. So the dates for the new workshop are commencing in October, starting on the 5th. And anyone who wants to take part is going to have to make a commitment. The commitment is 3 months worth, not just could I dip my toe in, but we're going to run it as a proper commitment to oneself. Because after all, if we're going to make a bond of how can I fall in love with myself, we have to get engaged with ourselves first, do we not? We really do. So please, I see Kirsty has just posted for us, info@mindfulme.me is how you can find out more. Talk to Kirsty. So Kirsty is kirsty@mindfulme.me. Talk to Alfie. Everyone knows how to go about doing that. Lynette and I will come back again next Monday night at the same time and talk about a bit more to do with our workshop and ask each other some more questions. Do you feel as though you want to say anything else, or have we said what we wanted to for tonight, do you think?
I feel like this is a gorgeous place. A gorgeous place to pause till next week. Yeah.
And that we're hoping that people are encouraged by the truth of it is entirely possible to not only begin, but to deeply and completely fall in love with yourself. We know that this is a task for all of us in our lifetime, to meet ourselves in the deepest possible level. So in the doing of that, with closeness in our community, we'll encourage each person to dive deeply into themselves. So if you want to take part, this commitment is necessary. Jostling for position here. It's lovely, isn't it? So I talk to you next week at the same time.
Next week at the same time, my love. Thank you so much. This was gorgeous.
Yes, I know, I've enjoyed it too. Do you know what we're going to talk about next week is actually meeting ourselves in the deeper parts of ourselves, understanding what it is we long for. So if you'd like to join with us, Lynette and I will come back and talk again for half an hour or so next Monday night. Lynette, thank you for putting this time aside.
And thank you so much. This was gorgeous.
Always nice spending time with you.
Lovely. I love spending time with you, Helen.
Big hugs.
Bye, my love.
See you all. Good night, everybody. Thank you.